Hey folks, thanks. This is Melissa from Thrasher Golf. Wanted to go over with you a few things about the Twister 1 to help you as you do any kind of regular maintenance on it. First thing we're going to show you is how to switch out the brush and shaft. There are a few steps to it, so we'll pan over to the Twister and get started. First things first, you want to make sure that it's removed from any power outlet. We're using a newer unit today, so a few things are going to be different, and we'll go over that with you. But hopefully you have this set up so that the safety connection is connected. You want to take that off so that you can get the top off. And the top just lifts off. Pull it out from the hinges and set it aside. Next thing you're going to do is remove the chain guard. The tools you'll need for this is a 1/2-inch socket. You can set it up on a drill if you've got one. We recommend using a ratchet for the to remove the motor so that the screws on the motor aren't stripped when you're working on that. So I'll get started and get the chain guard off. Set those parts aside. Next thing you want to do, you're going to have to remove this large pulley, but in order to do that you got to get the belt off, and so you want to loosen the motor. And so down this way, alright, so hopefully that's loosened enough. You can kind of feel a little bit of a jiggle here. So we got our motor loosened, we're ready to get the belt off. The best way to do it is to grab up top. It's going to get a little dirty. Grab up top, pull away from the pulley with your fingers. Don't get your fingers caught, just keep pulling and rotating the pulley and it'll come right off. Okay, so we're at the point where we need to take the spiral off. In order to do that, make it a little bit easier on us, we're going to first take off this large pulley. I'm using a 5/32 Allen screw or Allen wrench. We're going to loosen it a couple times just to kind of get it loose, and then you should be able to pull it off just like that. Now, in real life and in reality, after the ball washer's been used for quite a while, it's not going to be that easy to come off. What you may need to do is to get a wheel puller. We don't have one for the purposes of this video, but essentially what it does is it puts a screw right here on the shaft, and then it has 3 little arms that you connect to the pulley, and as you crank it, it starts to pull it off by applying pressure onto that shaft, and it'll pull it off, and it'll be slow and it'll be painful and you'll have to put some elbow grease into it, but that's the easiest way without breaking it. These pulleys are a little bit on the fragile side. You know, they can crack, but hopefully that's not the case when you're working on it. And if they do, you can give us a call and we can send you a replacement one. Alright, so now we've got the large pulley off and we're going to start to remove the spiral. So I'm back to my 1/2-inch socket and I'm just kind of going to get these going off here. Sure not to lose your parts here. Same thing on the other side. it's going to come off either way. These bearing covers. Okay, so we got the large pulley off. We're about to take the spiral off. We've loosened our nuts, removed the bearing cap here. And what we recommend at this point is for you to loosen the bearing a little bit. So I've got my 1/8 inch Allen screw, and I'm just gonna kind of give these a little loosen, just a little turn, just to kind of get them loose. Again, this will probably be a lot more ugly and dirty and a little more tight. There's 2 of these Allen screws on each bearing, so you just want to make sure you get each one of them. Then move to the other side, do the same thing. Sometimes they'll just kind of pop a little bit. All right, so now we've got it loose, and essentially what we can do is just give it a real good jerk and it'll come up. Hopefully it'll be that easy for you. Okay, so we've brought our brush and spiral over to the table. We're about to get the brush out of the spiral. We have the bearings already kind of loosened up a little bit, and a couple things I want to make note of. If you're going to go to the trouble to, replace your brush and shaft, we highly recommend that you replace all the moving parts at that point. Highest on the priority list is probably the bearings, which are right here on the sides, and we also sell what we call a rebuild kit. So you get the brush and shaft, the 2 bearings, the large pulley that you saw me take off, the small pulley that the large pulley was connected to, and the belt that rotated them all with the motor. So you get the rebuild kit, and we sell that separately. And if you're interested in that, you can give us a call and we can set you up with that. That's what we recommend, just to kind of keep the twister operating at its peak performance as much as possible. So at this point, irregardless of whether or not you're keeping your bearings, you're going to try and get the brush out of the spiral. So you just kind of lift one side up, and it'll take a little finagling. I like to turn the spiral over a little bit and then pull it out. Again, this will be another dirty job, so probably a little wet and damp. Wear gloves. But now we got our brush and separated from our spiral. So I'm going to set the spiral down next out here, and depending upon what you're going to do next, now would be a great time to remove the bearings. If you're keeping the bearings, you'll need to remove these to replace the brush and shaft. If you got brand new bearings and a brush and shaft, you can throw this whole old thing away. It won't look like this. It'll be brown, probably rust colored and ugly, but all this can go in the garbage, and you can start over with your new stuff. Okay, so if you are keeping your bearings and you're replacing your brush and shaft, you'll want to take these bearings off on both sides. Good chances you're going to need a wheel puller for this task as well, but you may be able to, with a lot of elbow grease and some WD-40 or something, kind of get them loosened from the shaft. What happens is, all the dirt and grime that you're trying to clean off the golf balls, it gets into all these parts, and so they do get sticky and they get really hard to remove. So a little WD-40 and then pull them off this way. Even with a new one, it's just, you got to put a little elbow grease into it. And so these are both off. Okay, so for the purposes of this video, this is our new brush shaft. We took off our bearings. Some of us probably had to use a wheel puller, but that's just part of what happens with dirty golf balls. So now we're ready to put the brush and shaft back into the spiral. You may think that we were gonna put the bearings on first, but we're actually gonna wait to do that until we get it back over onto the tub, because then it's all stationary and ready to go for us. So a lot of folks ask, is there like a left and right, up and down for the brush? No, there's not a way that you can put the brush in the wrong direction, but there is a specific way in how you should put the brush through the spiral. So here's the entry side. You want to turn this over and then load the brush through the entry side. That's where your shaft will sit, and then here's where the other side will go. We'll take this over to the tub and put it back on. Okay, so we got our brush and spiral over at the tub. We're gonna pop these in. What you want to make sure that you do is that the entry where the golf balls fall into, where my hand is now, that goes on the side where the pulleys are. So that kind of sets in, and you can see like how the screws will have grooves in the tub with the shaft to set in place, and the entire housing of the spiral sits inside the tub. And you'll just make sure everything's kind of settled and nestled inside. Same thing happens on this side. It just kind of pops in and out, and you make sure everything's kind of nestled in. From there, we'll slip the bearings on. And what you'll notice as you're doing this is that the brush shaft kind of has a tendency to move. If you hold one side with the palm of your hand while you apply the opposite end's bearing, you'll get those on there, okay? Then you put your housing on, and you just kind of want to get it just a little tightened. Don't forget your washers. You can kind of hand tighten everything just to kind of help out. Okay, same thing on this side. Don't forget your housing. Get that over the holes for the screws on the spiral. Get your washers. Hand tighten it down. Okay, so we have our bearing housing on. We just hand tightened the bearing housing nuts and bolts, and we're about to get it tightened a little bit more. So a really important step that we want to show everybody is what you want to do next. As you're tightening down the bearing housing, you want to lift the spiral shaft lift the spiral shaft so that it'll kind of come up. There's some play there. You're gonna pull it up as best you can. Shaft's still wiggling around a bit. Pull it up so that it's not resting at the bottom. I can't really put my finger there, but you don't want it to be rubbing up against where it was nesting down, only because as the spiral turns, it'll wear it out. So we'll tighten it down while we're lifting. Keep lifting. And you are going to do this process on both sides. Once I got the screws kind of started, the shaft was still lifted. It was in place. Okay, now we're going to go to this side, and same thing. There's some play there. You can kind of see it on the film. We're going to make sure that it's in that lifted position. Tighten my bolts. Sure it's lifted as you tighten. Once it gets tightened, you get those snug, nice and tight. Go back to this side, make sure they're good. Okay, so now you've still got your play in your brush. And we're going to show you how to align the brush so that it's in the right positioning. So on the hinge end, what you want to do is push the brush shaft so that it is flush with the collar on the bearing. Okay, so that's about flush. Now you're going to take your 1/8 Allen wrench and tighten it down. Remember, there's 2 places for this on each of the collars. So first I'm going to get them started, and then I'm going to just kind of give it another good tightening. Okay. Now on the opposite end, do the same thing. Get your Allen screws, tighten down. Rotate that brush. And give them a good tightening. All right. Okay, so we have our bearing Allen screws tightened down, and the next step is to put the large pulley back on. What you'll notice on your brush shaft is that there is an indentation, kind of an oval cutout. It's a little difficult to see on the camera. I'm kind of going against the top of it right now. That is where you want to line up the Allen screw that's in the large pulley. So you want to kind of line it up so that it's on the top. This one goes on the top as well. Just kind of a little cutout for that screw. And slide that in that way. And push it back as far as it'll go, and then tighten it down. This one was really loose. Okay, so now that's tight. Next step is to put the belt on. Let's see if we can get this on. So we're gonna hook it onto the back, to the bottom side of the small pulley. Hook it around the wheel, and hold one side. And as you do this, you're gonna wheel it around, wheel the belt around, and the motor's gonna lift just a little bit, and then it'll pop on. Okay. So now it's time for us to get the motor tightened. We've got our belt on. We have our large pulley and small pulley all set. Belts on. What you can see is that there's quite a bit of tension. The motor's still loose. There's not a lot of tension. There's a lot of slack in the belt. And so we got to get the motor pushed down so that some of that slack will come out. So here's the trick to how to do that. Get yourself a large screwdriver, and what you want to do is rest it up on this mounting plate here and then push down, and you can see how, I'll show you again. Watch it and hear how the spacing will decrease, goes down, and then you can see that the tension's different now. It's a lot more secure. So now you keep that force on the motor and start to tighten your bolts. Once you get the first one done and tight, it should stay in place. You can take your screwdriver out, check your tension, still good, tighten it up. All right. Okay, so really important, I just want to point out, this is a big key factor when you're working on the twister one, is you want to make sure that there's still some slack in that belt. After the motor's been tightened down, you want to make sure there's still a little give. If there's too much tension, you're going to put a lot of stress on the motor, and eventually what will happen is that your bearings and your motor will probably fail prematurely. So you want to make sure that there's still enough slack in that belt that it's running smoothly. This looks like we're ready to go to the next step, which is to apply the chain guard and then put the top back on and test everything out. Okay, so now we've got our chain guard here. Best way to do this is to start on this top screw here that's cut out of the tub, only because this one is slotted in, it'll slide right in. So I just kind of line everything up, get that going, and then stick your screw it's a carriage bolt, so it'll hold one side on its own. Then you take your washer, get that on there, and tighten that as best as possible. You may want to come around and do this other side. Just get it hand tightened first. Make sure it's nice and snug up there. Then I'm just gonna tighten this one side here. Okay, back on the other side. And we're good to go there. Okay, so now you just take your top, put it back on using the hinges that are here on the side, plug it in. Remember that the short cord goes to the motor cord, and then your long cord goes to your power outlet, and you should be good to go. Thanks so much.